Pete Peterson.
Francis McLaughlin, Planning.
Chris Schutte, Office of Economic Community Development.
I'm Dean Gates. Facilities.
Ryan Yellow.
Anna Donis, Clerk's Office. Amy Dombrowski.
Bill Steyer, Chugach Electric.
And the two interpreters will be Leanne and Colleen Peterson.
Thank you. Okay, so this morning we have one item on here, and that's the changes to marijuana licensing that we've been working on. And Dean sent yesterday evening his comment.
We added Sonnet and Francis to go over.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry.
land use. I put them as first.
Oh, I don't remember that now. You want to do that first? Okay. Sonnet.
Yeah, I talked to Sonnet this morning. She's busy and said I can handle it for her.
Okay,
For the
so
two
we'll
of
wait
us.
on this.
This won't take very long.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the backstory. There was about a month ago. There was an email that came across my screen of marijuana business that had concerns that about unequal treatment and in being compelled by the municipality to apply for a change of use permit as a part of the building permit review. And we've heard this before. And so to maybe try and put this issue to bed, I wanted to explain to you a little bit more about change of use permits. And I think this will only take probably 30 seconds for me to say my piece. I think that the marijuana industries or businesses that have criticized the change of use permits, it's a misplaced concern or criticism. I think it's based on their lack of understanding of the building permitting and the fact that they're going into a lot of like derelict buildings, which may be good for town, but difficult for the developer. There's a reason why the building probably is sitting empty. But mainly, it's because there were no existing marijuana businesses. So, if a change of use permit for marijuana is handled the same way it is for any other business. It's just that marijuana businesses are totally new. For example, a liquor store, a restaurant, church, daycare, they don't need a change of use permit if they switch owners, just switch the sign. But if you go from an office to a church, then a change of use permit is required. As we know, there's never been a marijuana business before. So when those marijuana businesses go to change owners, they won't encounter this problem. If you wanted to remove the change of use permit requirement from marijuana businesses, you would literally have to create an exception for only marijuana businesses and not any other business, because this is applicable, universally. So you literally have to create an exception for one type of use that wouldn't exist for any other type of use. So you can see how that would seem sort of backwards, right? Let's see, what else do I want to say? Also, marijuana businesses, many of the marijuana businesses had multiple licenses on one property. Sometimes manufacturing and cultivation, sometimes it's all, three. Marijuana, retail, manufacturing, and cultivation on the same property. And that almost by definition is going to necessitate a change of use permit, because it's rare that we have buildings that sort of have that kind of business model where they have three sort of very different types of roles in one structure. And, I think that trying to undo the marijuana regulations that have been adopted and reformatting them and moving to another place, that would be quite a challenge or an effort. That's basically what I had to say. Chris, is there anything you want to
Just to add to it, the conversation started from the industry's perspective of being unfairly singled out or treated differently in requiring them to obtain a change of use. And part of what Francis and others have been trying to communicate is that the change of use is a very normal practice for any business, doesn't matter what, and it's not adversely being singled, or marijuana businesses are not adversely being singled out. The liquor industry is the same way. As new bars, restaurants open that before were something else, that's a change of use. Francis's example of a church and daycare is a perfect example. So We feel that maybe there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about what is the trigger of a change of use. It's not specific to the fact that it's a marijuana license. It's specific to the fact that the use of the space, wherever that may be, has changed or is changing. And anyway, I felt it was important to clarify that point because there seems to be some misunderstanding in the community, especially in the marijuana side, about that point.
Francis, question for you. So the marijuana people are complaining because they have to get a change of use permit. But so does alcohol. For example, if I owned a lighting place down in Tudor Road near Chillicothe, and I wanted to add a liquor store, or a, what was it called? Oh, a bread, bed, and brew restaurant. I'd have to have a change of use for that one, right?
Yes,
Okay, this is coming in front of you guys when I'm talking.
we've got it. We're reviewing it now.
Okay. It's right next to
Yep.
a church.
Yeah, yeah. But that's a restaurant eating place alcohol license, but it
I know,
doesn't
but
have
they
the
still have to have a change in use because it's
Correct.
a lighting store.
Yeah.
It would be the same thing if marijuana was going into lighting, so they'd have to have a change in use. And so we're not discriminating against them based on that.
That's right.
Thank you, Francis.
I feel like we've had this conversation before.
Yeah,
So it's not just deja vu, we really have.
yeah.
Correct.
And for instance, I think the committee, I'll speak for myself, but we're 100% behind you. I mean, we've kind of told them before, it's the way it is when you do business in a municipality, it doesn't matter what business you are. And I think you're probably 100% right, it's a new industry. I mean, all the things you highlighted are very rational and they make complete sense. And the fact of the matter is, if people want to be professional and be in business, they have to do whatever other business in the municipality has to do.
I think these questions come back up because, maybe you have new assembly members after an election, or maybe you have assembly members that don't have the, because you work on such a wide variety of desperate issues that they don't have the focus and the special knowledge that this committee has about a particular type of thing. So you need to,
We'll keep them straight.
yeah, talk to your colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, but we want to emphasize the fact that if they're applying, if they're selling their business and it's staying at the same location, they won't have to apply for a change of use because it'll be the same use for the new owner. Is that correct?
That's correct, but that's absolutely everything you said is correct. But there could be more details if they wanted to, add a new use or add floor area or change areas within a building. Like I don't know any of those things. But yeah, if they just slid in and all they changed was the sign plate, then it would not be a change of use.
Right, but it would have to be more a 10% change or more, I think. Is what
Well, that has to do with the special land use permit approval that you guys do, which is detached from a building permit review type of.
Any other comments? I agree. Most we say that a lot of the things don't know, but on the other hand, I think when people look and say, well, they're retail sales, and for my story, dumb comics will just switch to games and do anything. So someone would say, well, my business is a B3, that's general commercial. General commercial, selling stuff. Down here, there's no retail sales. It's all retail sales. It says on my thing, marijuana retail sale. So they look, and I'm moving into a spot business and selling T-shirts or something for years. So change of use, and then they come in and go, what? So we have broken them out separately.
No, the story on that is that, look, if a bike shop on Spinard Road becomes a candle shop and it has no parking, it will still have to, through the building permit review, get checked for, it'll have to establish non-conforming rights, $130 application reviewed by Sonic Calhoun and land use review to establish non-conforming rights. There'll still be a zoning review because these buildings have non-conformities from the new code.
The bike shop switches to selling cannabis. They have to file for a change of use.
Well, I'm not sure if they have to file for a change of use, but the same zoning review occurs, whether or not it's a change of use. That's what Sonic explained to me this morning.
And let me just add, John, in the example that you've given, the assembly hasn't chosen to regulate comic book sales yet. And so, because there are special conditions attached to this particular
considering it.
retail, type of retail,
Special section, big
it is called out separately, and it is a change of use to go from a comic book store to a marijuana store.
I I just thought about the actual answer. I'm sorry. No. I mean, there's one more point I wanted to that I left off. That's why I'm interjecting. That marijuana businesses have additional or separate regulations that the retail establishments don't have. So a comic book shop, a bike shop, a candle shop, even though they may get the zoning review and all of that, they don't have some of the additional regulations on parking and loading. There's different set of rules for marijuana that we've created.
Alcohol too.
Alcohol, yeah, well, yes.
You can't go from a comic book shop to a alcohol shop, or you can't go from a comic book shop to a marijuana shop. That's my point, is there are different standards when you change what you're selling, I guess.
Yes. It's sort of complicated. The table of allowed uses has a long list of uses, and a liquor store and a restaurant, and all of those different things are listed. And so there is a change of use. So what you said is absolutely correct. But the point I was trying to make, just to put a fine point on it, is that in the parking section, in the loading berth section, in I guess not the landscaping table, but there are different design standards that are specific to marijuana. For alcohol, alcohol doesn't have its own set of regulations as far as I know. There may be, I'd have to check. But we often think of a liquor store in relation to marijuana because they both require a special land use permit. But that's sort of like an approval track that's just required by that table. The design standards, there's not a lot of design standards on alcohol industries but there is a separate set of things for marijuana.
Just like, thinking about alcohol and marijuana, there are differences. For example, with marijuana, we always have the smell of reservoir responsive notes. I don't remember last time we put that in alcohol. As far as this is, for instance, I support you this, as we did a year ago.
I generally think it seems to be working, and I can live with it, but I do, you look at the retail sales, liquor stores and stuff, category, and then we broke down marijuana. So there's, people buy. We're doing liquor or marijuana like alcohol.
Well, and
It's separate, the impact may be the same. but
They're both
perception-
different use types, though. You're saying that we've created a new use category, which is true, and that is a little bit different, but it's still, every one of those is a different use type.
I was just gonna say, we've been from the beginning, it seems, whether it's a campaign to tax and regulate marijuana or whether it's how we deal with it, everybody picks and chooses when we want to compare alcohol and marijuana and treat them the same. But the fact of the matter is marijuana still is federally illegal. So I think just that by itself gives us the opportunity to say, and, Dick made a point, and well, I guess now there's different ways you can drink marijuana, but with alcohol, it's a liquid that you ingest, right? With marijuana, there are ways, it's very pungent, and so you can smell it maybe in how it's being delivered. So I think there are nuances and differences, and I think to some degree the community itself, it was a very close decision whether we were going to do it or not statewide. So I think the community kind of has looked at it and said, okay, we're going to be cautious, and maybe a little more cautious than alcohol, but I think there's reasons why. So I personally don't have a problem with it. I think we've been overly fair and try to consider the impact and the differences and try to mitigate those early on. That's how I see it.
How do we compare to, Wasilla? So, I guess they don't allow it at all, but there are some places that are open that they say, they can get through so much faster than in Anchorage because we do all these.
Well, that's what's building in general in the valley versus
But
Anchorage.
do they have it just as retail sales is not a change of use in Kenai or wherever else?
Perhaps, John, I can add to that. I haven't discussed it with Mark, he's a marijuana contact out in Matsu. I am planning on giving him a call later this
And when you take a look at the size, we're huge compared to any other municipality in the state of Alaska. And we have a lot more concerns, a lot more zoning issues than any other place does. So we're bound to have more complex regulations than you would have in Homer or someplace like that.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
Just to throw something in there, I've been told by at least two people that some individuals who had planned on opening marijuana businesses here decided to go to California to open those businesses because it was much more difficult to get open for business here. A lot more hoops to jump through than even California. That's what I thought.
But you can grow it down there without your window.
Well, it's warm enough to grow it outside, I guess.
It is.
But then you would have maybe some security problems, I would think.
Right next to the grapes.
Yeah,
I grew up in that area, I know what's growing there.
Just to close out the topic perhaps, that we hear various rumors as well of people who started down one path here in the municipality and then just walked away because they found it to be too difficult or never even bothered to start. We hear lots of speculation about that, but the data, when we look at actually people that have started the process or expressed interest in the process, we have yet to see anybody that has abandoned their efforts to start a marijuana business here. Now, if they tell everybody they plan on doing it but don't actually come in and start the process, we have no way of knowing for sure if they've changed their mind or not. But as far as people that are legitimately interested in being marijuana entrepreneurs that go so far as to even contact us, we have yet to see anybody drop off from that.
And look at, John, how many have applied for licenses. I mean, it's a vast amount, so it's still attracting people to that industry. And people always complain about what government does. It's working against them, and I don't think this government is.
Well, and the thing, it's going to be for many, the cost of entry is going to be prohibitive. But a big portion of it is the inability to get loans and stuff for the specific venture because it's still federally illegal. And so you have to have a decent amount of capital in order to go into an already existing building or pay cash for a building up ahead of time. So, I mean, there are barriers to entry, and some of them are fundamentally have nothing to do with the state of Alaska or the state.
I think that I haven't studied the Fairbanks ordinance on marijuana recently, but I think that they were the first town in the state to adopt the recreational marijuana zoning rules, and then Anchorage followed them. And I think that Fairbanks made marijuana businesses a permitted use in certain districts as long as they met separation distance that they created maps for that was based on, as the crow flies, distances. So they could show on a map an area that the areas where marijuana is allowed freely, the areas that it's not. So they didn't have a special land use permit for marijuana for that town. That would save the applicant from having to go through the assembly and ask for approval of it. I think that what I heard Erica explain, that the theory on derivation of Anchorage's marijuana regulations was based on this new industry. We wanted to start out strict, and if we needed to back away, that would be easier than going the opposite direction.
Because I was involved with this from the beginning, as was Amy. We wanted to make sure the problems we had with alcohol didn't carry over to marijuana. Because it's something that's no control over the alcohol license law. We can protest the ABC board, whatever they're calling it now. We can protest there, but we're only considered somebody to protest it. With marijuana, we want to make sure that something has absolute control. Because we're the ones responsible for our decisions. If I'm wrong, Amy, tell me.
You're 100% right. I mean, we effectively have learned from the headaches and challenges we had with some of our alcohol vendors, whether it's package stores or whether it's restaurants, bars, whatever. And that's why there's such a militant, for me, there's such a militant focus on making sure the assembly has the ability to pull a license back, to review it, to modify it, and to potentially revoke it if necessary. Because we have had problem operators where waiting a year till their license comes up for renewal is just not acceptable in the public's mind for many. And if we, but I wanted to make sure there was due process too. That's why I think it's only fair if you're going to evaluate something, you have to give people time to respond. But that's why when we went through this, and it was, when we passed it, it was unanimous. I mean, every assembly member was supportive of what we had done, so.
Okay. And we've loosened things up in the last 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
On the other hand, I think we are seeing some responses to greater barriers to entry, people who have made it through like those now. So when you start regulating economics, I think I'm for it.
So again, the Batman versus Superman conflict, the comic books.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so we done with that? Thank you. I think you will never stop having people complain about it. It's all, I think this is, it's all new, and I think it's
But John, look how many licenses for marijuana we've turned down. Can you think of a single one we've turned down? Zero.
I think of one I'd like to have turned down.
We both know the same one.
Okay, thanks. So moving on to licensing. We have Dean sent out last night track changes version of the version that was introduced. Is that correct? And you had sent something a day or so before that had some notes. I didn't see track changes notes or anything on that. I opened it.
I think you had to change it
I did,
to
actually.
view.
I tried that.
To view
I
on.
didn't see it. So I missed.
Yeah, I believe Dean got, I sent it to him as well, and so I believe from what I saw, they all got it. He fixed it.
Okay, so if we look at what you handed out today from Dean last night, we can just work from that.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yep.
So Dean, do you want to lead us through this?
What I printed would show these track changes.
Yeah.
So this shows yours as well.
Yeah, we can use some comments on
And
Would that work?
I haven't seen it yet, because I was locked out of my computer. I forgot to change my password, so.
It was late last night too, so I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I got you.
I know, I keep forgetting to set reminders on my
We
phone.
do try to get them to change that to 180 days for last week, but they're still stuck at 90. And the problem is every 90, it can happen on Saturday or Sunday,
Right now.
it does.
I'm gonna be 36 months.
Mr. Chairman, I would strongly advise against any helpful suggestions to IT. If you want to save yourself some sanity.
We'll just stay away from them.
I'll change my password.
They're very busy right now.
Yes.
And they'll blame the SAP not
Okay.
starting.
So, you don't want to
I'm
time
gonna
to
defer to Dean, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, we just watched
Sure.
and then changes. So what was introduced, would be doing that. And I've already gone through like the first 5 pages. So my changes for today, for an S version going forward, and it's all just suggestions. Such a common suggestions. My comments were in the change. I guess the first thing we see is page 5. For the middle page, this doesn't really do anything substantive. It's legislative drafting format. The new language comes first before the new language. We just switched it around from what was in the new language first. So that's all. On that one. So page 6, and you can know and comes my voice a little bit. So page 6, I had a comment here. This is about fingerprinting, and this is the state statute for fingerprint-based background check. And I just made this comment for you to be aware of that. Right now, there's an issue given fingerprint-based background check to the Oscar because there's a risk that certain purposes you can get one for a nationwide FBI background check. You can still do statewide based fingerprint check in Alaska for all of our criminal cases. But if you want to do an FBI-based background check, it requires us to use the state statute. This purpose is authorized for the FBI nationwide check in marijuana retail or marijuana establishment owners and all that is not. So we have that issue with these Tyson cab chauffeurs. That's why I'm aware of it. So if that's something that we want to be sure we do background check that goes nationwide for our marijuana establishment, we want to put that on the legislative program.
Are we allowed to shut the door?
It's just that machine is very
Yeah, I
loud,
just wanna
I'm
make sure
having a
we're
hard
on.
time hearing. Can I
As
open
long
it a
as
little bit?
As long as it's not locked, you can shut it.
Mr. Chairman, what does APSIN stand for? It says that APSIN
That's
fingerprint.
Public Safety Information Network.
Public safety information. Okay, thank you.
Is this wording okay though? Or-
Yes, I didn't change the wording.
Okay, so.
I just wanted you to be aware of the scope of this background check is limited.
And my understanding, so this is language that we incorporated because the state incorporated it, but we can't do those background checks as the municipality. So we're kind of mimicking the state and just kind of as a double check that, they know that this is what they have to do and we can enforce on our license the same that they're enforcing on their license should they have issues. So we can't actually do the background checks, but if the state revokes their license for that, then this kind of covers that we can revoke their license due to the same reason.
Good, thanks.
I'm glad you asked that. This is a work code and it's saying to give a municipal license you need to do this background check. But the state is already doing the exact same background check. So maybe you won't consider the language is submitting persons and person fees are public safety. Maybe you want to change it to something that says has gone through the state's required background check instead of this. This seems to me to say submit it to us so we can submit it to the Department of Public Safety, submit it to the Department of Public Safety to us. That makes us, I guess, doing another fingerprint background check in people's states.
So maybe say any
If you
individual.
want, I can come up with some language to boost the incorporate, say, you have to have done the state's fingerprint-based background check to get our license, rather than saying.
So if the state's already done it, we don't need to do it. That's what we're saying, right?
Well, that's kind of what I think we would want to.
Dean, can you create the language for us we need?
Okay, sure.
And there are good chunks of this that do mimic the state. We do require a lot of the same things that the state does. That's just kind of how we've written the original licensing AO, and that's so that we have the same power over our license and that the state has had, and we kind of are our double check for them. So this kind of followed that. This was new language that the state just passed, and so originally it was Erica's recommendation to add all of that in. So I don't know if we necessarily need to add this one in, as it's not really something that we do require, that it is more of a state requirement, but in the license application, we do require that they disclose if they've had any thing that would show up on the background check. So
Just like I said, we pay Dean big dollars for being our legal assistant, expert on this. So let him come with the language he's comfortable with.
Well, I just want to make sure, because we can take the wording fingerprints out of this, right? We could just say, any individual reported under this section must meet the requirements of the Department of Public Safety. That's essentially what we're saying.
Well, I think you would reference the state code, or the state statute.
And you could cite the statute.
Mhm, and I'm assuming that's the same statute.
Or let's say something perhaps, and I'm better at writing and speaking the language, but something that says, recorded as between states and Department's background check. The state means the office. It means correct a lot of the language we have in now with this whole chapter 18 in California.
Okay.
Sewage and states regulations, not intentional. Sometimes it doesn't really work well, but it's great for starting point. This is one thing we would have to remember when we need to take and do with the states and countries.
Amy?
I was just gonna say, it sounds like Dean has a way that could work, and I don't know what pro or con it would be just to say any individual reported under this section must meet the requirements under AS 12.62.160, because then you don't even have to say it. You just say, that's the statute that deals with fingerprinting and fees. They have to meet it, no matter what changes are made. I don't know, if that would be helpful or not helpful.
Well, they submitted an ownership change to state applicants as well. So perhaps we just want to say, give us a copy where you sit and say to read and background check. However, I'm not sure.
And
Yeah, they don't send us the actual background checks. We don't.
they just tell us if they pass or not. And that's why I say, I'm not even sure, without reading a lot of AS 12.62.160, I don't even know what it says. I mean, I'm assuming it's referring to fees and fingerprints and background checks.
We don't know exactly what this is.
But to me,
So
I
this
mean,
is just the same thing that the original applicants have to do. This is if there's a change in ownership, the new owners have to go through the same process.
Say background check.
yeah. I say keep it simple.
The state had amended their statute. That's with their office. That's on the legislation. The state, they do background check. It does deletion on but it doesn't say municipal statute. So we can't do it.
Okay. It's good.
My next
Page 8.
is page 8. So in the middle, I just takes a little sleep dropping. And that work written was here, but it wasn't written in code already.
So by taking it written out, we can send it electronically, is that the reason we're doing that?
Yeah, that's the intent. So I guess previously it wasn't in there in the original one. It was something that I think Erica had added in. And so I took it out when we changed the process, not realizing that it wasn't already in there. So it didn't need to be taken out like that. So now we're correcting that because we submitted it with the AO.
It was just draft before.
Yeah.
I had made a suggestion in the past that you don't say written notice or electronic notice or something, you just say notice.
Right.
And then, there's a case file, it says notice reasonably calculated to the 40%. I can actually say, so we come back into the particular
Good.
I guess it's at the top of page 9. And so it's just a bit sleep drop and change. So this section 1071, we didn't make any changes to it, but it's in here already, and it's in ordinance that was introduced. So I think rather than just move it all, but just indicate it here in the previous language that there's no change in civil context.
Okay.
We're not making any changes to that section. So at the bottom of page 76.2, in our earlier drafting, this is sentence 5 means this is where I'd stopped. So it's without in bold for exclusion form. This is just this.
Okay, watch this here.
Now the transfer upon satisfaction of all conditions. At the bottom, subsection D, I just suggested a cross-reference to instead of because that section it directs that the person has to post the license and the premises, and there's any same thing there. So when I see I don't see, I think it's an idea of cross-reference. If we make amendments in the future to this section, we don't have cross-reference. We make this amendment, the other section says the same thing. It's kind of dangerous of having sections of different parts of the same chapter. It's then it's try to cross-reference reduce those.
This is B2.
Page 11.
B2, page 9, B2. I just want to read that.
I know, that's really good.
Because that bold is new words for it, right?
Yeah.
Subsection G.
Say again, B2? Oh, I just want to look at B2 again. I just want to read it, make sure I'm going to get it.
That's what we talked about, Andy, of a couple of these requirements. Gives us somebody the ability to
Alright.
modify or remove conditions.
That was a wonky sentence.
Yeah, I think
That's
it
a
was
tough
just,
sentence,
I think it
yeah.
was just to clarify though. I
We
mean,
just wanted to make sure it was written in there that somebody could.
Well, this means assembly can do what it wants. I think the phrasing
Fire
fires
the law.
any such conditions of the transfer or imposed. Sounds like something that's necessary.
Well, there's the section that addresses more specifically what to do with the transfer.
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe the intent of I believe the intent of the wonky sentence is just to say that the assembly has the power to grant, or to approve transfer of license with conditions, and condition their approval of that transfer upon satisfaction of the conditions that they have set on it.
Sometimes the transfer is approved.
The condition is grant of the transfer. That's the
yeah,
question.
the way I read this, I thought it actually clarified what we meant. That's, I
That's what I
thought,
thought it did.
I thought when I read it, it was like, yeah, I guess we did kind of have a half, I mean, I just thought it was clarifying language. I didn't really see it as a new concept.
No, concept's good. I just, when you get or imposed, where's the imposed? I think I get the intent, I'm just not. On application, otherwise, assembly may add or remove, modify conditions of license, including conditioning its grant of the transfer on satisfaction of one, any conditions of the transfer, or imposed on the transferee. What's the or imposed?
So, if I might offer a suggestion to Dean, if you end the first sentence after the clause modify conditions of the license, period, and then start a new sentence that describes the rest of what you're trying to communicate, which is so the application transfer license of the person, the assembly may add, remove, or modify conditions of the license, period.
Say these include, or this include conditions.
Well, you get rid of including, and you would start a new sentence that essentially says, the assembly may condition its grant of the transfer on satisfaction of any such conditions imposed on the transferee. You don't need to say that. You can just stop it there. It basically just splits that sentence into two.
Oh, I worked at a law firm, and sometimes when you take a comment out, it can change the complete contents of the context of a sentence. I've seen $1 million mistakes because of a comma versus an end of a sentence. So I'm not a lawyer. It just makes me nervous.
Plays one.
I know. I've seen these comma mistakes before, so I don't know. I'd have to go to Dean's legal expertise.
You have this recurring ongoing comma argument.
See, you laugh. You laugh because you know what I'm talking about.
And you
So-
know, for this language, we can start with conditions of transfer period or imposed on the transfer. That was, I think it would help stand about this. I think I was thinking here.
Oh, I see.
Transfer sometimes may owe past due taxes. That's often the conditions that are added with past due taxes. That's on transferring normally that they have to pay for the transfer.
Okay.
And that's thinking as opposed to approval of the transfer itself in institutions. But I think it has the same effect if you just put a period there and get rid of the or imposed. I'm comfortable.
Well, maybe. Now that I get it. So there's conditions put on the transfer.
Yeah.
There's conditions on the person asking for the transferring, two separate. Is that, okay, that's why the or, the transferring, okay.
I'm perfectly comfortable with this language here.
Okay.
So am I.
Okay.
It's that or
Well,
goes.
I think it makes sense though when you put it in context of examples, like library fees, for example, right? That's not a condition on the license, that's a condition on the licensee.
Yeah.
Pay your past due library fee,
Yeah.
right? Versus a condition of you can't X, Y, Z in the operating establishment, or you need to post signs or something like that. Like,
Okay. I'm good with it like that
Okay.
now. Thanks, though.
You guys working about 20 minutes or so?
That's about it, and then I'm going to
My
It goes
wife-
down,
my
our
wife-
accuracy
my wife's
goes
done
way
that
down.
Before, she says 20 minutes, they have a break.
That's right.
Okay, so we're good on this, maybe?
It's hard to read. It's hard to read. So the next thing at the bottom of that page, I think you cross reference.
Good with that.
Page 11, there was a new subsection G added, and this is fees for inspections. So, I guess there were two things here. The first, I was deleting the sentence that talked about land use enforcement inspections. That's because this is Title 10 and the land use, everything land use is Title 21. So I was just thinking about fees for land use inspection being Title 21 and not here in Title 10. And these would go parallel processes. And Chris is speaking of that. But I'm just not comfortable bringing Title 21 language and stuff here. That's just a license. A license has to comply with Title 21. And if we need about Title 21 stuff, provisions of land use inspection fees about
And just to make sure, what is deleted here is already addressed in Title 21. You need to go to Title 21 now.
yeah, in Title 21, I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's already inspections that apply to everything that's done in the whole Title 21. Land use permit, conditional use permit, yeah, special land use permit on the line.
That's
Those
it.
inspections are done.
Ryan, did you have a-
Maybe that was from Erica. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
We got
An older
last
copy.
meeting,
So-
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good deleting that?
Yeah, and I would add, the G was added in by Erica to address possible charges for secondary inspections, and I don't think she knew if the departments already had something set up for their fee charges, or for their inspection fees. And so this honestly could be removed altogether.
Yeah. It's an old code reference, and I can't speak for HHS, but as Mandy said, the cost of the inspections, whether it's 1, 2, 5, 10, is covered, would be covered in the proper section of Title 21. So it could go away, and I can't imagine it having any material impact if it wasn't there.
You say G.
Yeah,
G
it should
just go away.
completely go away.
The discussion we had a couple weeks ago was how many times could you have an inspection and not be charged? I think it was 3. And then they would charge you additional money after that. If you can't fix the problem by the 3rd time, then they charge you additional fee.
DHHS said that it was their policy, they had
Right.
info that it was their.
I just don't want to take that out. I still
No,
want
and
that.
that's in their specific title too, so.
'Cause I mean, I can see the first couple times, but after a while, it's already.
Can I ask a question? So Dean reworded section G here, but am I hearing now that not to accept the rewording, just a completely strike both versions of G?
Well, that would be one recommendation, simply because the fees charged for the inspections of the different disciplines, whether it's fire, health, or zoning, are established in those relevant code sections already, so it seems kind of duplicative.
Welcome to city government.
You know, we could delete it, but this section is about fees. So if I want to open a marijuana business, I look at the marijuana code and I'm reading through this and I say, oh look, 0 fees, this is awesome. And then I get into the process and go, wait a minute, I can't even think of 0 fees. So having a little flag here saying, so maybe fees elsewhere.
Which I recognize, Mr. Chairman, and my recommendation, I think Eric at one point was talking about this, is that you call that out on the application forms. They don't embed a warning like that in code, but that you embed it in the materials that an applicant would have to go through anyway. So similar to starting a new business at the state of Alaska to file for a business license, there is disclaimer language that says, you're going to pay your whatever it is now, $250 for this business license, but there could be other fees associated with whatever type of business that you open. Just to put them on notice that it's not a one-time marijuana license fee and you're done.
Okay. So we can delete G.
I could go either way. You
What
know,
versions of G? Then we'll delete both.
well, the one thing I like about the way Dean reworded it is he doesn't call any fines or fees or anything out. You just reference it to send people to the other code to look at it. But is it duplicative? Yes, it is. But I don't care either way.
And one of the other, and this is purely from a code writing standpoint, but one of the other challenges in having these references to the fee sections of the relevant disciplines is that should those ever change,
Oh, that's true.
we could create orphan code, and so it might be worthwhile to pull it out.
Well, maybe changing the title then, it says fees refund, maybe call that license fees and refund, just kind of clarify what we're just talking about. License fees.
Well, this is the licensing code too.
Like over.
No, I get you.
What does it cost to do this?
None.
Fees are 0.
I know. No, I know exactly what you're saying. That's why I said I could go either way with this. But that is the problem when you reference one code and another code, the other code can change.
Would I be good with dumping G?
I'll
For
do it.
clarity, but, or, just clean it up, but then put the top fees. You're reading through this, whole thing, if you get the fees. This is the problem we're having, is they're going through the marijuana stuff, this is what they think they have to do. And then they go, here's my building, and now they deal with this land use stuff, because the whole change of use and all that, so.
Yeah, because what you're saying is there's a difference between land use fees and license fees.
So just to make it clear.
This is
like-
as written now, this is what we currently have.
You're going through appeals and but this would be properly phrased license fees or license and renewal.
Well, the whole overall AO is marijuana licensing regulations, so
If you think it would improve the entrepreneur's understanding of what's expected of them, you could leave G intact and just broaden the language to be more generic in nature, something along the lines of the applicant will be responsible for, could be responsible for additional fees from, additional fees beyond just the application fee. Something that's very broad that doesn't reference specific disciplines or code sections, but just puts them on notice. I think whether that's on the application materials or in code is up to you guys. Our preference would be to put it in the application, but that's up to you.
I think the
I
application.
think the valuable piece is mostly for someone who hasn't applied yet, goes to let the code see what they might be faced with. How that refers to this. It also, I look what Chris said, it doesn't have to be so specific to DHHS or just say, there may be additional fees for inspections and purposes by the department's code, not just put someone at most. There's more than just the $0 license fees.
Yeah. Yeah, I just
The
like that.
application process and by Chris.
Yeah, and it's simple and easy to understand.
They've got, each of the applicants got a lot more sophisticated, they've layered it up. And They're not just somebody wanting to create a bud shop. These are professional organizations coming into town.
Well, you remember the wonderful flow chart that Ryan gave us last time? Yes, that, exactly. My whole point is that they're gonna start here, and they're gonna be big enough. Basically, these are all the things you have to do, and there's, I'm sure, a list of, these are all the associated fees too, with XYZ applications, right?
And this is also something that we could put on the website, and so if they're starting to search, all of these things we can add to the marijuana webpage. So,
I just don't think this is, I don't think this is that.
Yeah, put that on the website, it says, here's your checklist, start here.
Exactly,
You know,
that's why I don't think it has to be codified. I'd be fine just taking it out.
Mandy, is there anything we can do to add a cost to that? In other words, approximately these could be your cost for fees and everything. And that way they at least know, John, up front what to deal with.
Estimate?
We could do a range, yeah, because it varies on a case by case.
I know, but
Yeah.
a range would be nice. That way they could have an idea of what it approximately would run.
New building versus old building, how big?
That's tough.
I just,
It's tough.
Okay, so we have a choice, leave it in with very
Are
general
you speaking
language.
of a range in the code?
no, hard cap.
This, chart, I don't know, I'm open. What do you want to do?
I'd go with the real easy general language that there would be additional fees charged.
Additional fees may apply.
Well, we're putting that in codes code? That seems weird to me.
It's just sort of a warning type of a thing. I think if we put this in here, obviously, someone reading this is, an average person is not going to be able to go find the cross-reference, or it'll be difficult to find the cross-reference laws to understand this. I think if you just put an average marijuana person that's going to open a business would read it, but there may be additional fees, okay, all right, we sort of expect that, we're working with government, they charge fees.
You know, put it in a broader thing, is because by the time people come here and we're talking to them, they've gone through the states, they've gone through the municipal process, and there may be some people weeded out that we don't know. An example is there's a family that bought a house in Ocean View, very residential, and they bought it with the specific idea that it's perfect, but they changed that garage into a grow operations 500 square feet.
And they hang signs up too?
They went far enough that they had some kind of signs out. There were official state Alaska notifications that were going to do it. They notified the community council. They have in their heads that they are certain they can do this. I talked to them, said, you know, this is the process. I think we need to tell the city. No, City Franklin said, we're good. Yes, we can do this. But and they're not stupid people. I mean, they're smart people. They've got jobs and real lives, but they just missed this.
Well, they missed the entire city process.
Absolutely.
So it's not gonna matter if we put it in there.
They wanted a yes, they got a yes from Cindy, why would you go search for a no? It's not where we operate. Or much, they got a yes, they were charging ahead. So, I think you know where they're now.
I haven't heard anything about them.
They're set up to be good. You got to talk to anybody in the department?
I haven't heard anything in regards to that property, but maybe there's some miscommunication because they're going after what I assume would be a limited cultivation license through the state, which just had slightly fewer regulations to it than standard cultivation license. But still need to go through the municipal process.
And now that Eric is there, I think it'll help that.
Yeah.
Right, no, I believe so, but there are people who are not that sophisticated, who are just really trying to make sense of it. And I'm willing to help them by just saying there may be other means.
Okay.
John, there are also people that just decide to ignore it. I've got some people wanting to put a community house, they called into my area. It's not zoned for a community house. There is no zoning for a community house. And they want somebody to bring an ordinance for it to create it after we've already had the business for a year there.
A community house?
Yeah, they call it a community house. They invite people to come in, and one weekend it was bartending, the other week it's gonna be tools they wanna lend out to people. It's odd, you'll hear about it when it comes to assembly. Odd definition.
That's a separate issue.
And they're attorneys. They never looked up a law.
Okay, so Dean will write a very general language that says
Other fees
other
may
fees may apply in some way.
Which next to the section 12. I just want to involve underline. It's just a legislative project. For the remaining section, the underline, this is adding a new section straight out of Cambridge.
Okay, so we got that. So you make a note, this is a new
Section
section. That's a new section. Okay. So who does that? Is that Amanda, you take care of that? Or?
Well, this will be added in.
We're kind of
just
teaming
as a
up,
little bit, So, yeah.
So nothing changes but the underlying.
I had, in that section B, I just suggested some language change. Clarifying, I guess when it says lettering must be at least in contrasting colors, I didn't want some creative, this is kind of letters of different colors and stuff. That's not what we need. We need the letters in the background are in contrast. So
Okay.
I just have some language change.
Any issues with that? Okay, good, thank you.
In the next section 14, I didn't insert a change, but I just pointed out that this second sentence after the edits are pretty much saying the same thing that's already in 1080 by the section isn't in this document, but it says pretty much the same thing. This is separated cultivation area and complied with all applicable standards. The difference here is number 2, that's having signed it identifies marijuana production areas and just considering as well. So we can read this here. I just wanted to point out the redundancy in the section. Sometimes you get to quote, and one moves statutory interpretation of quotes and guys. You say one thing here, one thing there, and they're not exactly the same. You must need something different. That becomes these problems.
So that's
what I try to
usually don't see.
Yeah, it's not in stuff, but it's in code.
It's where?
Code, I don't know. When we pull up that section, 405B, and read it out to you. Marijuana cultivation facilities or uses a licensed urban code and compare it to this one, 415. So 405B says a licensed marijuana cultivation facility fails to apply for a marijuana product manufacturing facility license from the marijuana and retail marijuana store license. A marijuana cultivation facility that obtains another marijuana establishment license shall 1. Conduct any product manufacturing or retail store operation including completely separated from the marijuana cultivation facility by a secure door being co-located, and that's the same as this 450A1 and in B2 before B2. Comply with each provision of this chapter that applies to any other type of marijuana establishment license that the marijuana cultivation facility licensee obtains. So that B2 there is the same as A3 here. In this 450, in this A3, in this A1 that I just did with this one, that's also current code. That's not being changed by this ordinance. So I didn't make any changes because it's all in current code. I just want to point out that it's similar.
Does it matter that it's between the cultivation versus the constant? Is this in the cultivation? Or 8405?
It says concentrate.
Okay, so it is. So it's the concentration is prohibited in the cultivation. Okay, got it.
So
So growing
that's
and
manufacturing.
making some concentrated product.
Production house, that's manufacturing.
Security. The only thing this section adds is you sign and upload certain last two locations.
Okay. So it does look redundant. Do you want to delete that sentence?
If I was going to suggest something, I would just say, here, your second sentence, anybody in your run product manufacturing facility, manufacturing facility license must, I would say, comply with 405B, which I just read, and have a sign on what separates the two locations. And rather than saying A1 is going to change. If you want me to get rid of the redundancy.
That's a lot tighter.
Yeah.
So basically, we've only added must have a sign to what's in B.
Yeah.
So we would get rid of A and, or, 1 and 3. Would that alleviate rid of?
Well, then also, I think the second sentence would change that to must comply with B. That work?
I don't know if it's a problem that they didn't get our first line.
You don't like it. You know, it's hard to read. I know you got it right below. So you're okay with it?
Yeah, but if you want to make it simpler, I honestly don't care in this section. I think I don't think, I didn't have a problem with it when I read it. But if there's a reason.
I didn't make any changes because I agree, it doesn't matter if you read it or remove it. There's no such thing as changing. I just like to point out that this word we're saying this is required, it's always it's required in other sections as well.
Yeah.
Just leave it.
Because you would leave it alone. Okay.
It's fine to keep in.
Okay. Okay, so no change there.
Concentrate.
Okay.
My feelings on hurt.
We do repeat ourselves a lot, Dean.
So,
So page 13.
so should I go on to the next one? Yeah, the policy continuation. I'm just changing their Alaska food code to English food code. So our DHHS inspectors already apply English food code. That's what they're doing. We have I think it's called the full, I'm not sure, state of Alaska to our, to the state food code, since we have, because it's much, it's very strict.
Since we do our own inspections.
I have to say that
It also makes more sense for our inspectors to apply food code that applies in our jurisdiction.
I was just gonna say the best part of this change was Dean's commentary in the box. Because we're proud of Anchorage. I got the sense of humor. I appreciated it.
Does that change good?
Yeah, it surprises me. We would have referred to state code in the first place.
Well, the original language which is exactly what the state law says.
Oh, we just pulled that.
We're not gonna look down the street.
That's what we need to
So, what have we been doing here? Because we approved cultivation, DHHS has gone in and looked at it, and probably using the city code anyway, right?
I guess, yeah.
Okay,
call it conforming amendment.
Yeah.
okay.
Section 15 seems the other one. This is in sections lower down. On page 14, this section 17, smoke prohibition. I this is already in ordinance submitted or not, I'm not sure. If it's already in ordinance that was introduced, then I think we need to have that seen. And there's no changes here.
Yeah, I think we left this out because we couldn't figure out what a commercial
Well,
grade
because
lock
in
was.
the fire code, it's already, they already have standards for the locks and stuff.
There was
That's
no
why
need
we
to change it.
said we're not gonna come up with creative language, we're just gonna let the fire code apply.
Yeah, so we submitted it as,
With that in there,
yeah.
we'll delete it, we'll make an amendment, or take it out in there.
Yeah.
We definitely, I think, we decided last time we wanted to take that out.
So Section 17.
Yeah, section
Because
says it needs to be.
didn't change, that's what is currently in there, and so we don't need it.
Are we deleting subsection D?
Yeah, that's what its current language, so there's no change. It could be similar to the one previously where it's left in there for context, but, we didn't do any changes to that.
I would change the sentence, previous sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, yep.
Okay, so the main issue here is we need to make a version of the F version.
Yeah, we just need to change the title to, not hereby amended to read, but, is left in for context.
Where's the, this was over section 2. So section 17 was in the reading.
Yeah, and that's what we have as current language.
And this is current language.
Yeah, there were some proposed changes, however, when I got information back from Cleo Hill and we discussed it in the last meeting, it came down to, she was more concerned about the fire exits versus the actual entrance and exits, so they were separate.
So I got that. I just want to make sure we need to show in the S version, how would that be shown in section 17? Because this is what was introduced, so the S version,
We would amend the title.
you just bold this as a deletion from the S, from the introduced version.
So what it would change is line 1, see where we crossed out, in the version we introduced this, is hereby amended to read as follows, right? Because we had no changes. However, what we're saying after we looked at it, we weren't gonna amend anything. So what Andy's saying is, basically nothing is changing, this is left in for context. So the S version would show the little,
Is hereby amended to read as follows would be marked out, and it would say left in for context.
yeah.
Okay,
Because
and that's
we're
what it'll show, so if someone goes through to compare the two.
Right.
Okay, that's fine.
Because when you look at what we passed, it's already, this whole section T is already in here. Right?
Good. Okay,
My
page 15.
My favorite section.
I didn't make any change in suspension and revocation process. We have, I'm aware that the city state they want to retain control of this. What this section currently says is looking forward to the age of the employees making decisions and so forth. and like comments on size. We could change that so the assembly actually retains more control over the final decision. So sending it to the AHO and then make a final decision if he was screwed, of course. That's what this is. And I'd say we could change this if you want to. Maybe it's a discussion for another time or future board meeting, probably not. But we could do where the assembly forces the AHO to conduct hearings, take evidence, make actual findings, and recommend a decision. These recommend findings, conclusions, and decision of compliance. Send the recommendation out to the assembly for adoption.
Yeah.
That's a process that's used in the state and the state procedures now. So that retains the final decision for the whole suspension.
Yeah, I think that's what,
Assembly.
I think that's what they wanted.
But, well, look, sort of, but we also didn't want to review everyone. We wanted the ability, if there were complaints, we could pull it and then review it. But a lot of these would automatically go.
Well, that's not what we're talking
Yeah,
about
this is
though.
what it is.
This is, okay, so this is, you have a complaint, you have a problem child basically, let's think of it that way. You have a licensee that you're considering suspension or vacation or modification, these are not your annual renewals.
Okay, so this isn't, we've gone through.
So this, yeah, so this is, you have an issue with an operator and you pull it back to review it. This is kind of created a new situation where the hearing officer, because initially the assembly said we will be the only arbitrators of this. So we created a system in this ordinance in which a hearing officer now potentially might be able to hear it. But what Dean's saying is, all along the assembly has said we will maintain the only decision. We will be the body that makes the decision on licenses. So what Dean is saying is he didn't make a change. But what we could do is we could still leave it this way where we can refer it to the hearing officer to make findings of facts and conclusions of law, and they can send it back with recommendations, and they can send it back to the assembly for adoption of the hearing officers. So that would leave the assembly as the only arbitrator, the only decision maker.
Okay, so I got you.
So that change hasn't been made. Right now, if it stays the way it is, it's the assembly or the hearing officer, right?
And John, now if you don't mind, I do not want the hearing officer, I want the assembly. Okay?
So how do you feel though about the quasi approach where they can have the actual hearings and the adjudicatory process?
But the
and
decision,
make
final
the-
decision has to be the assembly's. The hearing officer's not responsible for any constituents, assembly members are.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can add, I think that the process that some of the training laid out is probably ideal because of the process of hearing a case, presenting of evidence, et cetera. The assembly potentially would miss out on that if it went through AHO first and then came to you in the form of a recommendation. At which point you probably would want to redo all of that again because you'll want to know the circumstances. If I remember, I think that the AHO was recommended simply because, at least on our side of the table, from a code enforcement standpoint, that's our final arbiter of our decisions. And so we were just thinking of how a typical code violation process is handled. These are different types of violations, and since the assembly is the final arbiter in these issues related to marijuana, it would be a much more efficient system to remove the AHO from it.
You would take it out completely.
That's for discussion. I mean, I think that would make the process cleaner and clearer and more efficient.
I would take them out completely. And besides that, the AHO was only brought in part-time. And in talking to the AHO, she says she's being overworked now. So if we had additional things to her schedule, I don't think she can handle it.
Well, she's
The
got to have
assembly-
a lot of on-shop things.
Well, the assembly has the ability, though. We only meet twice a month now. When I first came on, we met 4 times a month. So if we need to add another meeting to deal with marijuana issues, then we just add another meeting.
Well, and we've actually done really well with adjudicatory processes by creating a subcommittee.
As long as you stay on it, I mean, it's fine.
We have enough lawyers now.
That's the problem.
I kind of thought we were hoping to avoid the quasi judicial hearings. And that's why we wanted to leave this in for the administrative hearing officer. They would do the judicial review, so to speak, and come to us with a report, and we would make our final decision. That's kind of, I thought, what we were talking about.
Well, Patrick's going to want to completely get away from public judicial hearings. I personally like them because, as Dick said, I think we're more responsible. But the way this is read, it's only, the administrative hearing officer would only be used if the assembly referred it to them. The assembly never has to refer anything. So, I don't know if that makes a difference to you, any of you.
As long as it's our option to give it to the AHO, I'm fine with that.
Because I personally like the idea of the assembly being the final stamp on it. We're the ones that say yes, no, these are the modifications. And I think that's what the community expects. But
We can't duck that responsibility.
But if the administrative hearing officer collected all the information and had the hearing and just presented us with a report, we would still get to make the final decision.
I agree. And so I personally, I'm one who fought adamantly to make sure the assembly maintained control, but I'm not opposed to the hearing officer just because we've sat through quasi-judicial hearings and I know how incredibly detailed we must be.
Yeah.
So I have no problems having that findings of fact and conclusions because you still, to me, it's a lot like a P&Z case, right? You have P&Z case, and if something is settled over there, it can be appealed to the assembly, right? And so the assembly still gets all the information that was presented at the case in front of planning and zoning, but we still are the final arbitrator if somebody doesn't make the decision. So, not always, but
You still have the quasi-judicial book?
I do.
She gave us?
I have everything, yeah. So I'd like to know what you think, John, because I personally am fine with leaving it in, but I do like the idea that the assembly is the one who makes the final decision.
Because what is the appeal for AHO? Go back to the assembly. Okay, so you appeal, so we would come back to us.
Well, but if you follow the path that Assemblyman Nefosky laid out, it would be similar to P&Z. So the case would be presented and argued to the AHO. The AHO would issue a decision or declaration that then goes to you for ratification.
But it would only go to the AHO if the assembly referred it there in the first place.
Right.
So that's what I mean. It kind of just gives you another tool in your toolbox.
And I don't expect that we're going to be giving them one of these every month or two. This will be something that happens every year or two or three. So I don't think we're going to overload the hearing officer.
But I have a feeling, especially the first thing that comes through, if there are any, I have a feeling the assembly's going to want to retain the control anyway. That's my guess. What do you think, Dick? What do you think?
I can go with this. It's just that I want to make sure we're not overworking the AHO. The assembly never gives us the final decision on this. And we're only going to be here a short period of time. 3 years, we can all be done.
Oh, stop, we'll be back. So,
Who knows?
would the committee be okay with leaving this in and having Dean draft this language to make sure that the final decision, if referred to the AHO, comes back to the assembly for ratification?
I'm comfortable with that.
You want me to draft that language?
Just to suggest, I think, if you change, let's look at line 13, it would maybe be something like, assembly may hold hearings or refer hearings to the administrative hearings officer who may recommend.
What line are you on?
You have a different version, I think.
Which group? Which page you on?
13, on page 13.
Oh, so it's line 21, I think. The assembly may refuse to issue or refuse to renew a license. Is that where you're reading? Yeah. Well, yeah, you're in a different version. So line 21. Go ahead, John.
So you're line 21.
Yeah.
He's looking at B.
Yes.
That would be, okay. So after administrative hearings officer who may recommend that the assembly suspend, revoke.
Oh, yeah. Would that do it, Dean? Just to add on line 24, after the word may, add may recommend suspension or revocation of a license?
They recommended the assembly. Recommend the assembly suspend.
I kind of revise the whole paragraph D to just make it clearer.
Okay, well, we don't have to wordsmith it. I'm fine with some wordsmithing it.
No, fine.
So by saying that, John, giving some pretty much assembly suspend or revoke license for these grounds. Assembly will refer to the administrative hearing officer to
was the hardest section and the one I was the most passionate about.
So page 16 looks like you're at it, but it's a comma.
It is, you have to be careful, that's a double comma though.
Double.
It's not $1 million comma. It's
$500,000 or $2 million?
I'm telling you, it's a $1 million comma before.
Okay, so any thoughts on that?
Where's Matt Grudenberg when we need him? He could give he would quote the law, why the double comma was invented and when to use it. I'm telling you.
You did work with them,
Yeah. And that was good to know that stuff, because sometimes you mess it up and then you have to go back and redo it.
That's why Dean totally laughed when I said it, but working in a law firm for a while and seeing somebody change where a comma goes can change the complete meaning of the sentence and an outcome.
Okay, so.
It does, the current does have a double. Did they already fix that?
Well, actually, I read these things. It's like the current code. It doesn't have to come as the current code. So
they
we
must
use
have-
And that's just a Scrivener's
Something that
correction.
just happened, but we were doing drafting back and forth and tracking changes. Then, we used two columns and put brackets to
Yeah.
change. But then we go through drafting.
They might have fixed it.
Several rounds of drafting, we would get current codes of one product.
Mine is a single comma.
Yours does? Okay.
Okay, so we finished going through this. So Dean and Mandy will create an S version.
Minor changes.
We'll send out pretty quick.
Yeah, and we are aiming to have it on the regular agenda, so Friday.
Is this for Tuesday, or is this gonna go?
There's a week and two, right?
So
The 20th.
it'll go on the 25th assembly meeting. Our deadline to get it on the regular agenda is tomorrow afternoon. So we're aiming for that. If not, we'll get it on the.
So then
agenda
we'll have it before us for action.
on the 25th.
25th.
Yeah. That's perfect, because then your deadline's May 1st.
Now I'm starting the minutes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Nothing like cutting it close.
Okay, good. Well, we beat on this a lot. Hope it all works great.
I'm sorry, just a couple places we skipped through. There's one here on page 946.
There's a comma.
Page 8, where are we looking?
So line 46 on page 8, actually is required to have. I only suggestion because public security isn't always required.
Yeah.
Simply can one if it's a transfer or renewal. So I just say if it's required, I say it's wrong. Then
Yeah.
person who was just, I think that's more of line.
I think that's good.
Was there anything else?
I think that's all.
I would watch, we still have at least one place assembly with a capital as opposed to small. Get that all like that. Anything else? Good.
I'm good. I'm happy with how this turned out. It was a lot of work, but thank
That's
you.
great. Okay.
Great job, man.
I printed out a couple of.
Just closing comments on this matter and then some agenda settings. Closing comment on this matter is while we were having this discussion about your case of the Ocean View property owner, I visited the AMCO website and it is very, very light on references to local control. So one conversation that we might have if we know anybody at AMCO is to beef up the references to paying attention to local options.
That would help the industry.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised reading through it that it almost exclusively leaves it out. Yeah.
You know, the people from Ocean View could have come to their assembly representative and said, hey, we need to have Anchorage opt in for these 500-foot residential growing permits. That's what they should have done, John.
There, I was at the community council meeting every time they were there.
And then the second matter, real quick, Brian, the second matter was a scheduling one. You had asked about scheduling a session on the forthcoming unit lot subdivision code amendment, which is in queue today, will be entered onto your agenda for introduction on the 25th.
What is that for?
It'll be introduced on the 25th for public hearing on the May 9th. You had asked about having a work session at CEDC on that. What we would like to suggest is, would it be possible to schedule a full work session rather than just a CEDC session? Because we'd like to invite a larger pool of participants from the finance industry as well as from legal and the real estate industry.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
And I think we thought about today, then we thought, well, we'll have likely some new people when that's being kicked around.
Sure. But the one change would be shifting it out of CEDC on Thursday the 4th and pushing it into a work session on Friday the 5th, if you're comfortable
We
with
didn't
that.
schedule it yet. No, so it's not scheduled.
Okay.
I just kind of threw that out as, I thought we had time today.
Then we can meet at City Hall in a bigger room.
Right, exactly.
And can I make a request? I'm leaving for Fairbanks that day, so I prefer it not be later in the afternoon.
Should talk to that lady
Yeah,
next to you.
I would prefer it to be a little bit earlier.
What time?
They typically start the work sessions.
At 11.
Yeah.
I know, we started creeping more and more, and some are at like 1 or 2, and I just can't make those.
Okay.
But this is something different.
What time can you make it?
I can make it at 10 or 11. I can make it at 12.
Why don't we shoot for
Just
10?
got the 1 hour meeting.
We can shoot for that. Yeah, I mean, this is a code amendment to Title 21 that has been through about a year and a half of work, as well as Planning and Zoning Commission approval. So a lot of the background work has been done. I don't think it should take too long, but you never
What do you
know.
want to call it?
I'm sorry.
What do you want to call the work session?
Well, I don't have the ordinance number in front of me, but it will be the unit lot subdivision ordinance.
So what committee, work session, is there, this committee, how is this a work session?
It wouldn't be under that's the difference that I wanted to put in front of you. It wouldn't be this committee that would be calling it. It would be an assembly work session.
So it's like rules committee?
Could be the rules committee. I'll talk to Barbara today.
Doesn't have to, yeah,
It doesn't have to be changed.
it's just a work session on an ordinance.
But the challenge is
Unit-
that if
unit lot
this committee
subdivision.
wants to.
Unit lot subdivision.
And hear it.
I'll talk to Barbara today.
Deal with that.
You can chair the meeting if you wanted, John, since you're the chair of this committee.
Yeah.
That's
Either way,
typically that way
Sure.
that goes.
I'll just-
I'm familiar
I'll get
with
the
it,
meeting
looked
set.
at it. I think it's not complicated, it just opens a new door. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of implications for communities, neighbors, or anything, so I don't expect a lot of pushback. I've been shopping around, because I just want to make sure, so I'm talking to a banker, a mortgage friend of mine, who's going to work for you, that haven't gotten yet. Yeah. So, but it is big and intriguing, and we're educating people.
Okay.
Okay, no, that sounds great. Okay, anything else?
Ryan, did you have anything else?
Mr. Chair, I'll just wait till after we adjourn. It's more just personal curiosity about you proposed marijuana growth.
Let's drive over there.
Yeah.
What street's it on?
Barron or something like that. I
Barron?
mean, right in the heart of the neighborhood, these people come across, they're just normal, they're excited, they have this business and they have other stuff going on.
That's over
But
there
they've
on the
gone
Johns
beyond.
Road side of the
Yeah, it's
subdivision.
right, it's the east side, right across from John's Road. It's
Yeah.
actually a few houses in a nice house and
That's really nice.
They check your bill.
Oh, I'm sorry.